I just picked up this old jointer or planer, and it's a tool that I've never had before, but I've always struggled getting nice joints for gluing up panels of wood, and this should really help me dial in those joints and get nice solid connections. It's an old model made by Tanner here in Auckland, New Zealand, and that's the same company that made my lathe and my bandsaw. I picked it up fairly cheap on Trademe. You can find these fairly easily, but it does need a bit of work. Blades need replacing, and I've got to clean it up and make sure everything is level and in plane with each other. The back of the fence has two adjustments that I can turn with this handle by moving it from side to side. So the front one adjusts the tilt of the table, and it has some stops for 90 degrees, which is nice, and the back one allows me to move the table forwards or backwards. The knives have a few chips in them, and I think they're a little bit past sharpening, at least for me, so I'm planning on ordering a new set of those. This didn't include a guard for the blade, and I definitely want one of those. This guard came with it, but it's actually meant for the back of the blade when you have the fence moved forwards. I'm wondering if maybe I should just use this as the guard, or if I should try and work out a way to make an automatic guard that swivels as you pass the wood through. Unfortunately, there's not really anywhere good to mount a swiveling guard, so I might try and rig up a way to just use this for now. I'm using a 400 grit disc on my sander to get rid of some of the corrosion. I'm not trying to aim for a mirror finish, so I think that's going to be great. They've cleaned up really nicely. So I've been trying to loosen the screws in the gibs to be able to swap out the blades, and so far I've managed to get them all moving easily except for these last two, and the spanner just rotates around them, so they've completely rounded over, and a few of the screws that I've taken out I can see on the edges that they are a little bit rounded over, so I think someone was using the wrong size spanner, and maybe these two were just a little bit too stuck. So I'm going to cut through them with a Dremel, I think, and then once I can take the gib out, hopefully they'll come loose, and then I can just buy replacements. Quite a few of the bolts that I took out had rounded corners on them, so I decided to replace them, but they're a really weird thread. They're not M8 and they're not a 5/16 either UNC or BSW. So I'm not sure what they're meant to be, but I decided that 5/16 was close enough. So I've got a 5/16 inch tap, and I'm just tapping the threads in these, and I'm going to replace them with some square headed bolts. These are a little bit too long, so I'm going to have to grind them down, but I think the square head will be better because I couldn't find any bolts with a smaller head on them that would fit in the slots. It's been a real pain, but I think I've got a good solution here. So with the new 5/16 tapped holes on these gibs, I've bought these square head 5/16 inch screws. The problem is when they come originally, they're a little bit too long to fit in the slot on the jointer, and they poke out the other side. So I've got to grind down the heads and then grind them to length. It's not too difficult, and I've got a couple of little jigs that help me with that. So I've got this little block of wood that I've screwed the new bolt into, and I've got 4 of the original bolt heads sticking out here, so that lets me gauge the length of the bolt that I need to grind off. Now that I've got the bolt ground to length, I'm going to rotate it gently chucked up in my drill against the belt grinder to slightly dome off the top. That way it'll be able to rotate freely while pushing pressure against the slots for the blades. So I'm ready to install the new blades, and I quickly knocked up these blade setting jigs. So it's just 3 magnets glued to a piece of aluminium square tubing, and I've inserted some wood down the center of the tubing to give it some more rigidity. And these, I just referenced the table of my jointer as a flat surface to glue them up. So all 3 of these magnets are on the same plane. Then I can use the table of my jointer to make sure the height of the blades is equal from side to side. And to make sure that the head is in the same place on all 3 blades, I've just clamped this ruler to the table as a reference for where to stop the head as I rotate it. So I've just got the bolts to where they're starting to engage. I'm going to carefully attach my blade setting jigs so as to not ruin the edge on the blades. And now that magnet is going to hold the blade at the right height while I adjust the bolts. These magnets are strong enough that they're pulling my spanner when I'm trying to adjust the bolts, which is a little bit frustrating, but I'll get there. And now all the blades are set at the same height and exactly the same height as the outfeed table, which is exactly how the jointer should be set up. I'm really happy with how that worked. It was very easy to get them all perfectly the same height, so hopefully I've got a nicely tuned up jointer now. I contacted one of the local suppliers of woodworking machines here in New Zealand, which is Carbotech, and they managed to sell me this mount for a blade guard, and it fits perfectly on my jointer. The guard that actually came with it is a little bit too long and it's going to stick out. I checked with them that they sent me the right one. They did send me the wrong one initially. I returned that, got the right one, but it's still too long. I think they probably make the same guard for both jointers and people just deal with them being too long. But this orange guard actually came with the jointer, which is meant to be the rear guard, so I'm going to use that. I might eventually paint it or something, but for now it's going to work fine as a guard. So I was considering making a rotating blade guard like the American style, but I got some advice from a friend who said that she finds the New Zealand version of blade guards a little bit safer. because the American ones tend to expose a lot of the blade, and you can just knock them with your hand and put your hand straight into the blade anyway. Whereas with this, I can't knock it or move it around without adjusting it. And it's really easy to adjust. I'm not going to be using this all the time, so I think I'm just going to stick with the New Zealand blade guard style for now. So I'm really happy with the cut that I'm getting from the machine. It is nice and 90 degrees to the reference face, and very straight along the length. So I'm really happy with that. It's doing everything I wanted it to do. Now the jointer cost me $300, and I had to spend a little bit more than I thought I would do getting it up and going. So the blade guard mount was $149, but that came with a bunch of other stuff that I didn't need, but that was the only way that I could find to get one of those. The new blades were $70. The Gibbs screws that I had to replace were $20, including shipping. And then I spent about $20 on the blade setting jigs. So a bit more than I thought it would cost, but I've got a really good machine that's going to last for a very long time. And yeah, I'm really happy.